Hello and welcome to another video in my Web API.NET Basics tutorial series. As always, please go ahead and follow me on GitHub. Sorry, what was that? Hold on. Man. There we go. I think that's back in order. Right. As always, please go ahead and follow me on GitHub or visit my website. And if you have any questions, feel free to email. So now in this one, now I've got the tool stuff ready. This is video number 10 now. So before we begin the coding, I want to talk a little bit about my approach, my philosophy of software development and the philosophy that we followed in all these videos, which we'll follow. Now, what I like to do is I like what is called as a sandbox to software approach. Right now, what I like to do is whenever, I like to think of software as if you're building a house, where you build your house brick by brick. I mean, of course, usually houses and buildings are built by teams of construction workers. And I'm not talking about that. Imagine you're building your own house. You're alone, right? And then, but that's what we are doing here. Like all my tutorial videos, I'm just coding alone. I don't have a team member or something like that. So if you're learning, if you're watching my videos, that means you're also doing the coding alone. So you're building a house, you're building it alone. You build your home brick by brick. Okay. Similarly, I think software works something like that. I mean, of course, eventually at some point you can't build your own house completely. And just like that, software also, you have to build it a team. We'll come to that. But yes, so we've built it one brick at a time. So what I like to do is before I build something, I always like to figure out and kind of sandbox whatever it is that I'm trying to build first separately. Okay. Now, an example for that is, let me bring up my Paint app here. So right now I have mentioned that on my GitHub repository, I have 2 demo projects as of now, which we will be building at the end of this video series. I might add more projects by the time I finish recording all these videos, because it is a long journey. So we have a long way to go. So I have 2 projects here. I have the comic book shop project, which I already talked about in the beginning entry videos. And of course, I also have the for Bobbler project, which is like a Azure services kind of deal. So here, let's take this example of this one. Now there is a feature here where I'm able to translate text from English to other languages like Kannada, Hindi, and French. So here, what I would ideally do is if I go here, I have this. If I go to this link, I should make that link. Right. So if you go here, the link from the article, you'll see here that I have an option. Microsoft gives you a small snippet of the code which runs in the console project. Right now, this is the code which will just run just fine in the in a Visual Studio Console project. Now, what I would do is I take this project. Now, if I go back here to my for Blobber project, I go here to my Web API demo. I go here to controllers. I have a controller called translator, and I have this code here. So essentially what I did was, so let's just put that side by side. I have the example code given by Microsoft, which runs just fine in your developer console, in a console project. And I was able to sit down and use this, practice with that console project sandbox, and later I was able to put that in my API controller. So that's what I'm talking about. So which means what you have on the left side is your right side is your sandbox, and this is your main project. So which means, so this is how it works. So I have my Blobber project, which is a big project. It has a lot of features. So which means they're all working just fine. I don't want to mess something up there. Now, obviously, the way I build software, I build it in increments. I never mess around with an existing file. So whenever I add a new feature, I add it as a separate folder or a separate controller, a separate interface, a separate dependency injection. So things are always added as a separate thing. They don't mess around with existing features. So I already am careful in that respect. But still, as an additional extra careful step, what I do is I go ahead. So I have the main Blobber project, and I'm planning to add the translation feature to it. So what I do is I fire up, just like the Microsoft, tutorial article. I open up my own, Visual Studio Console project, and then I sit and run the code completely separately, isolated. So there is no interaction between these two things. They are not related. So if I make any mistakes, I make the mistake in the isolated sandbox. Now the sandbox in this case is a console project. The sandbox could be anything. For example, I put a video on the DevOps a few days ago. And again, there, I mean, I already have my DevOps organization. I already have my agent running. I already have my pipelines working. But when I was making the tutorial, I made sure that I created a new organization. I configured a new agent pool. I set up a new agent. Why is that? So that I can isolate it completely from my main, organization stuff. So similarly, when you're coding as well, bring in the same approach. Always practice in your sandbox. The sandbox doesn't always have to be a console project. It could be a full-fledged MVC project as well, where you're trying new things. So that is fine too. So whenever you're learning new things, start with a sandbox. Make all the mistakes you can. Experiment all the things you want to do. And then when you are feeling confident, bring that code. You can even copy paste the working code, or you can just bring in the knowledge to your main project. Now, obviously, when you bring the sandbox code to your main project, you have to make some changes. For example, here, now on the left side, this is an API controller. Now on the right side, this is just a console project. Now you have things like console.writeLine, you have things like this one. Now those things will not directly translate into an API controller, right? So you still have to work hard to make this work here. For example, here you'll see here that this person is just giving the text directly as a string. However, in my API control, the text is coming from a form. So obviously I have to make adjustments. I have to make the change the code to suit my expectations and requirements here. So you still have to do the translation when you go from your sandbox and to your main project. But the main thing is, there the challenge is only the issue of translation from the sandbox environment to your, in this case, an API controller environment. But otherwise, as far as the concept itself is concerned, thanks to the practice you did on your sandbox, you are able to understand, okay, how the translator SDK works, how the translator API works. You can try new things. You can understand limitations. You can try the exception that will get raised. You can understand the limits of the service, the cost of the service. So everything can be done already in the sandbox. So that way, a lot of the headaches, will not come to your main project. So this is what I really mean by my sandbox to software approach. So whenever I'm trying something new, I always try that out, that new thing in a sandbox. And only when I'm confident that everything is working fine in the sandbox, then I make the next step of putting this code into my main project. Now, obviously, this, as always, will incur some amount of effort. Now, of course, if you're feeling really confident and if you're an experienced developer, maybe using the sandbox would be a complete waste of time for you. And I am in agreement with you. However, as I have mentioned before many times, this video series is meant for the first time developer, somebody who is applying for an internship or a first job. And then for them, I think you should give yourself the luxury of time. Yes, there is benefits of being in a rush and skipping a few steps. But for me, however, I do want to emphasize that this is like an investment. When you're learning programming, it is a lifetime investment. So any extra time you spend today putting in the strong foundation will only come back to help you. So you spend an hour today, you will gain that 1 hour's worth in gold tomorrow. So I do feel this is a better way of doing things. At least, even if you disagree with me, which is perfectly fine, I myself will be following this principle throughout this video series. And in fact, all the things I'll be doing in this video series and on my YouTube channel, I'll always be doing in units, where I try things out in a sandbox environment, and then only then I'll add this to the main project. Like for example, immediately after this video, in the next video, I'm going to go ahead, like our ultimate goal is to build a full stack project, like an e-commerce shop. Now that is going to be the main project. But before I add every single feature to the main project, I will be building every item that will go into the project as a separate video and as a separate tutorial. So that is what we are going to be doing anyway. So there you go. I hope this approach makes sense to you. It may not make too much sense for a experienced developer or an intermediate developer, but for a first time developer, for which is what this video is for, go ahead, experiment in your sandbox first, and when you have received some confidence that yes, this works, only then take that idea, take that concept, take that SDK or the endpoint, whatever it is that you have experimented with the confidence of having already worked with it, go ahead and add it to your main project. So this is what I like to call the sandbox to software approach, and you'll see me applying this throughout. And this is not like something I invented. This is something, for example, I use a lot of I also do a lot of learning. I have like right now I'm learning DevOps to become much better at DevOps than what I'm already am. So again, there also, they always, the Microsoft Learn articles, the tutorials, and other tutorials from Udemy or something, they always do in this way. I mean, not always though, because some teachers, they go directly to the project, but I like the Microsoft way of doing things, where they do things one item at a time and then upgrade that to the main project. I think so that's the story here. So there you go, folks. That is what I'm talking about. So every video now, so before we add something to the main project, we'll learn how to build individual items in separate sandboxes and then put it on the main project. So hopefully you will like this way of doing the software building, because it gives you confidence. As a first-time developer, it gives you the confidence. Again, taking the translator example. So when I build this, before I added the translation features to the for Blobber project, I messed around with the SDK and the cloud service in the console project. I tried many things, and only when I was satisfied that I've got a good hang on things, only then did I take this knowledge and take some of the code, not all the code, take some of the code into my main project and into the API controller. So this system really works, and because this is what I've been doing all my life, and it has worked just fine. Okay, so there you go. That's all there is to it, and I'll see you in the next one.